We've heard from his own mouth that Mitt Romney, what Mitt Romney thinks of 47% of us, that he thinks of us as takers dependent on government. Here's a picture of Mitt Romney, the taker, in 1968. That's Mitt Romney on a beach in France taking a special draft deferment given only to Mormons, which allowed him to escape service in the Vietnam War. There he is, the very picture of obliviousness. Oblivious to the fact that while he was playing in the sand on French beaches where 2,500 Americans died in one day in World War II, thousands and thousands and thousands of young Americans his age were dying in Vietnam for a foolish war that America was on its way to losing, a war that the oblivious young Mr. Romney fully supported. The oblivious Mr. Romney also supported the draft. He participated in what might be the only college demonstration in history in favor of the draft. But Mitt Romney was not in favor of being drafted himself. He was not in favor of getting his hands dirty in the military. He was in favor of his college classmates going to war and dying, but not him. Romney men don't go to war. His father didn't. Mitt Romney didn't. His sons didn't. They support wars, but they refuse to fight wars. Millions of us, including those of us who were in high school at the time, were opposed to the Vietnam War and protested against both the war and the draft. Bill Clinton did everything he could to avoid the draft back then without the benefit of the special Mormon deferment that Mitt Romney enjoyed, but Bill Clinton also opposed the war. He didn't want anyone to go to that war. Bill Clinton was not in favor of forcing others to go to Vietnam to die in his place, like Mitt Romney was. Young American men had terrible choices to make in those days. Protest the war or serve in the war. Protest the draft or surrender to the draft, or avoid the draft, or evade the draft, or even flee the country, or go to prison in defiance of the draft. Noble men made each one of those choices. Going to war was not the only brave choice then. Morally centered men made each one of those choices. The amorality of Mitt Romney's choice was something that I had never heard of until I read Mitt Romney's story. I did not know that there was a single American man who publicly protested in favor of the war, who publicly protested in favor of the draft, and then evaded that draft himself, and then sat idly by, played in the sand of French beaches, while expecting other young American men his age to go to Vietnam in his place. I did not know anyone made that choice. Mitt Romney thinks of people taking veterans' benefits as dependent on government, thinks of them as the takers. We could have had 58,000 more of those takers. 58,000 of them about Mitt Romney's age taking veterans' benefits from government right now if they hadn't been killed in Vietnam when Mitt Romney was playing on the beach. The oblivious Mr. Romney was reminded of that today. Reminded that he and his father and his sons did not serve in the wars of their era. He was reminded of that by a man whose family has done the opposite. Before introducing President Obama at a campaign rally in Virginia today, Virginia Senator Jim Webb said this about the people Mitt Romney thinks of as the takers.
They're calling these people takers rather than givers. Let me say something about veterans benefits. I grew up in the military. My dad was a pilot, flew in World War II, the Berlin Airlift. I was a Marine. My brother was a Marine. My son was a Marine. I've worked on veterans issues all Governor Romney and I are right about the same age. Young guys. Like millions in our generation, we came to adulthood facing the harsh realities of the Vietnam War. 2.7 million in our age group went to Vietnam, a war which eventually took the lives of 58,000 young Americans and cost another 300,000 wounded. The Marine Corps lost 100,000 killed or wounded in that war. During the year that I was in Vietnam, 1969, our country lost twice as many dead as we have lost in Iraq and Afghanistan combined over the past 10 years of war. 1968 was worse. 1967 was about the same, and there's not a day that goes by when I do not think about the young Marines that I was privileged to lead. Those young Marines that I led so many years ago have grown older now. They've lived lives of courage, both in combat and after their return, where many of them were derided by their own peers for having served. That was a long time ago. They are not bitter. They know what they did. But in receiving veterans benefits, they are not takers. They are givers in the ultimate sense of the word. There's a saying among war veterans: all gave some gave all. That's not a culture of dependency. It's a part of a long tradition that gave this country its freedom and its independence. They paid, some with their lives, some through wounds and disabilities, some through their emotional scars, some through lost opportunities and delayed entry into civilian careers, which had already begun for many of their peers who did not serve. And not only did they pay, they will not say this, I will say it for them, they are owed. They are owed. If nothing else, at least a mention, some word of thanks and respect when a presidential candidate who's their generational peer makes a speech accepting his party's nomination to be commander-in-chief, and they're owed much more than that. A guarantee that we will never betray the commitment that we made to them and to their loved ones.